You could not write a list of great movie premises without including the sublime Jurassic Park. Cast your mind back to when you first saw the trailer for Jurassic Park, or when you first heard about the story idea, the story of Disneyland occupied by dinosaurs that are fighting humans. It's amazing. It's the kind of idea that you hear and it takes you back to your childhood, back to when you were full of dreams, back to when you were imaginative, creative. It plays into that sandbox environment of the creative mind. It's a work of genius. Now, Michael Crichton, interestingly, is not considered by a lot of writers and critics to be one of the best writers of all time. He's actually considered to be a somewhat flawed writer. He has a scientific background, and that shows in his writing because his writing is often more of a lecture. It's very stiff. It lacks the fluidity of a more poetic work. But what is absolutely spellbinding about Michael Crichton is his ability to create great ideas. I mean, take a look at the Terminal Man at Congo. The man somehow has this spark in his imagination that just blows your mind. Citizen Kane. Premises come in all different shapes and sizes. There are premises about space battles involving galactic empires and rebellious forces. There are stories of love that simply melt your heart. There's adventure stories. But the absolute best stories that man's ever created, works like Hamlet, works like Crime and Punishment, they take the essence of what it is to be human and they distill it into one single premise. Citizen Kane does precisely that, and it does it absolutely brilliantly. If you haven't seen Citizen Kane, perhaps because you don't like older movies, you don't like black and white movies, whatever, go and watch Citizen Kane. It's one of the greatest movies of all time, with some of the best cinematography that you will ever see in your entire life. And the premise is absolutely scintillatingly beautiful. Now, I don't want to give away too much for those of you, but I will say this. Citizen Kane is about a media mogul who passes away and says the word Rosebud as he dies. An investigative journalist tries to decipher what Rosebud means. He journeys through Kane's life, but when you find out what that one word Rosebud actually means, it takes your breath away. Because it reminds you that despite it all, despite all this noise of the world, despite business, despite stress, despite everything, what really matters to you is probably just some rosebud, some sense of freedom and joy that you had when you were a kid. And Citizen Kane expresses that with poetic majesty. It's a divine, masterful piece of work with one of the best premises of all time. The Notebook. Romantic movies, romantic stories, the romance genre at large is the most saturated genre in the whole of storytelling. There's 1,000,000,001 romantic stories. So imagine how hard it must be for a writer to come up with a premise for the romantic genre that has never happened before. It's a 1 in a million, bolt out of the blue. It's the needle in the proverbial haystack. But here comes certifiable genius Nicholas Sparks. And at sight of him, I bow down with reverence, because this man created one of the most beautiful romantic movies of all time, and one of the best romantic stories of all time, a story that melts my heart and everybody else's heart in the entire world, unless they're made of stone. The premise of The Notebook flips romance on its head. At its heart, it features a fairly standard love story. The love story is well written, but it's taken in its own regard, the love story at the heart of the Notebook is not necessarily spellbinding. But Nicholas Sparks knew that. He knew that for a romantic story to truly set itself apart, it needed a unique element to its story design. So what did he do? He flipped the romance on its head by having Old Man Duke, the male character in the movie, tell Allie, who has senile dementia, the story of their love, so that just for a few moments every day, she will remember that love. Now that is absolutely beautiful. That is a flower in the desert. That is the romantic genre. It's the kind of piece of storytelling that deserves to be remembered forever. Star Wars. Now, what can you say about Star Wars that has not been said before? Not a lot. And you might be thinking, the premise for Star Wars isn't really that unique. I mean, it's a story of good versus evil, set in space. Sure, there's some cool characters, but how is that premise? How is Star Wars' premise truly that unique to be included in this list? Is it just because I am a crazy Star Wars fan? Partly. But also, it's because Star Wars is not a sci-fi. It's not an adventure, and it isn't a fantasy. Star Wars, in terms of storytelling design, is a pantomime. Yeah, pantomime. Yeah. Why? Take a look at Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack lives on a farm. Jack receives a sort of magical sort of gift in the shape of a bean. He doesn't realize how powerful that bean is, but it creates a little stairway into the heavens for him. He climbs that stairway into the heavens and finds himself in a castle where he ends up in a fight with a giant. Now, how does that relate to Star Wars? Well, Luke actually goes through pretty much the same classic pantomime style storyline. Lives on a farm. He receives a magical sort of gift, the droids. He doesn't understand how important those droids are. They lead him on an adventure. He leaves his home. He goes into the stars. He ends up in a sort of castle with the Death Star, but for all intents and purposes, it might as well be a castle. He enters a fight against an evil entity. He wins the fight and he saves the day. Star Wars, Jack and the Beanstalk, pantomime. So why is Star Wars one of the greatest movie premises of all time? Because genius George Lucas took this galactic battle, this epic good versus evil, these armies of the rebellion and the galactic empire, such a huge story. He took all that and he distilled it into the story design of a pantomime. That is why Star Wars is so iconic, because even though it was fresh, it is also a timeless classic tale. That's why all the characters from Star Wars are so memorable and so familiar, because they're the same characters that people have been reading about for hundreds of years in fairy tales and pantomimes. George Lucas, by taking this huge space opera and by translating it into a pantomime, created one of the most inspiring and captivating movies of all time. And that's why the premise for Star Wars deserves to be in this list. The Truman Show. Jim Carrey was once a funny man in such brilliant movies as Dumb and Dumber. You remember Dumb and Dumber? What's your favorite Dumb and Dumber scene? Personally, for me, I love it, the whole Ma can bird, bird, sing, sing, ding. Anyway, I love Dumb and Dumber. And then you get the Ma, somebody stop me. And you get all the Jim Carrey comedies, and then you're thinking, wow, this guy is bloody funny. He makes me laugh my ass off. And then, out of the blue, you suddenly realise that Jim Carrey is actually a flippin' talented, serious actor as well. And of course, his repertoire of serious movies is awe-inspiring. But perhaps the single best movie that Jim Carrey has ever been in, certainly in terms of storytelling, is The Truman Show. Now, of course, at the time The Truman Show was released, reality TV shows were the rage as they are now, but they were a newer, fresher thing at the time that The Truman Show was released. So The Truman Show takes the idea of a reality TV show, blows it up to the nth degree, as writers do, because as any writer knows, the way you get a good story is you take a basic idea and just blow it to the nth degree. So The Truman Show takes reality TV shows and blows them to the nth degree. They make Jim Carrey's character, Truman, the lead of that reality show, and then they make it so that he doesn't actually know that he's living a fantasy. He's living in a sort of fantasy world. He's living in a game show. Now, not only does that speak volumes about society and about reality television, but it also is absolutely archetypal. Because so many stories are about one man that gets sick of his world, his personal world that he's living in, and he wants to escape it. The Truman Show is that story, but with such a genius idea of being placed in a reality TV show. It's ingenious. And if you remember the movie, if you watched The Truman Show and you got to that little boat, or the little bit where he's in the boat and he's rowing, he's trying to escape, and you weren't cheering for him, then you're made of stone. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Now at this point, you're probably thinking, Paul, are you actually just a Jim Carrey fan? And is that why you've just included 2 Jim Carrey movies back to back in this list of the best movie premises of all time? And yeah, I actually am a Jim Carrey fan because I think he's a genius. But also, both these movies, The Truman Show and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, are absolutely genius. So, in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Clementine visits a specialist to remove her memories of Joel, her ex-boyfriend, who is Jim Carrey. Now, Jim Carrey goes and does the same thing, right? He wants to remove his memories of his ex. But suddenly he realizes why those memories of his ex, why that part of himself matters so much. And you see that love story played backwards as his memories erase and as he begins to learn how much his memories mean to him and to the constitution of his character. Now, a lot of people think that Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a romance, but that actually is seriously inaccurate, because this isn't a romance. Romance movies are about either the obtaining of or the development of romance, of love, of a relationship. That's what a romance movie is. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind doesn't do that, and it is not a romance. What is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind? It's a psychological drama, because what matters in this narrative isn't the love. It's what that love represents to Jim Carrey's own character, to his mind, to his psychology. And that makes Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind a psychological drama that just so happens to also reveal a love story narrative. And again, it's by taking 2 abstract ideas, the memories and then the typical love story, and combining those 2 into something new that you get a fantastic premise like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. What does it take to become the highest grossing movie in all time? Special effects, brilliant actors, a lot of sex appeal, which a lot of movies use? No. What it takes is a bloody brilliant premise, which is precisely what Avatar has. Now, obviously, James Cameron, he's pretty famous for being a bit of an environmentalist and, going deep in the ocean and doing all that sort of stuff because he's an adventurer. That man leads a seriously bloody awesome life, doesn't he? Anyway, so at the time when Avatar was written, environmentalism was all the rage, as it is today and should be. However, the global warming situation was really, pun intended, at its hottest at that point. Um, James Cameron tapped into that. What's the premise of Avatar? The premise of Avatar is that Sam Worthington's character is given an avatar body which looks like an alien, so he can then live as an alien in their alien world and learn all about them. Incidentally, coming across Neytiri, who is... I love Neytiri, right? I think she's one of the best characters of all time. She's got this kind of spiritual bent going on, which I personally adore. And she's a naturist, which I am too. So anyway, I love Neytiri. But that's beside the point. The point is, by taking that environmental heated issue of the time and transplanting it into a sci-fi movie about a human organization that's going to completely destroy this living forest, that becomes a premise that truly matters, that people feel and resonates with people, because people care about nature. People care about those themes, And people also love sci-fi. So again, it's by taking those two things, by taking a classic sort of sci-fi story design, but then a current trend, environmentalism, and smashing those two things together. That's what makes Avatar an absolutely captivating premise. Taking two things and bringing them together. And in fact, if you go back through this list, you're going to find that virtually every premise included in this list does just that. It takes two already hot topics or already brilliant story ideas and smashes them together. Jurassic Park, that took the prehistoric dinosaurs, which were already in stories and movies, and brought them to Disneyland effectively, which obviously people love Disneyland. You put two things together that people love, they're going to end up loving it. You put chocolate with marshmallows, you get chocolate marshmallows, right? Or marshmallows in chocolate. It's good either way, people, right? Star Wars, pantomime, space opera, battle in space. Put those two together, you got to win. Truman Show, reality TV show. A classic story of a man who wants to escape his own world. Put those two together, you've got another absolutely fantastic movie. Whenever you take two great ideas and you put them together, you end up with a great premise, which is what so many writers do. And that's what James Cameron did with Avatar. He took the heated debate of the time, being global warming and environmentalism, and he took a classic sci-fi theme and he smashed them together, and he ended up with the highest grossing movie of all time. Now, if you're a writer like me and you're thinking, you know what, I quite fancy writing one of the best premises of all time, because for a start, I wouldn't mind making the kind of money that James Cameron makes. One day. Anyway, and also, you just love entertaining people, which is what I love doing. Well then, my advice, take two things that people already love, right? Smash them together. Hell, is how American cuisine works. You take a burger and a pizza, you smash them together, you get burger pizza. How are you going to lose? How are you going to lose when you take a burger and a pizza and you put them together? You're just going to win. Same with storytelling. And that is my list, my choice of the best movie premises of all time. So what are your favorite premises? Leave a comment, subscribe, let me know what premises I missed in this list, what premises you agree with that I chose. Leave a comment.